So we all know that freezer cooking saves us time, saves us money, and can even help us eat healthier. But what if I told you that there are even more hacks out there to making freezer cooking even cheaper, easier, and simpler? That's what we're gonna go over in today's video, so let's go. Hey guys, my name is Jen and I am an expert chef with FreezerFit.com. I have been doing meal prepping and freezer cooking for years and years now. My life is super busy. I have a full-time job. I also have a YouTube channel. I have kids in school and in lots of activities. And so when I freezer meal prep, I want to get the most bang for my buck. So today I'm gonna share 10 hacks with you that are going to make your freezer cooking just that much quicker and easier and maybe even cheaper. Okay, so the first tip is to make multiple freezer meals at once. Now, what do I mean by this? This means that if you are going to prep one freezer meal, you might as well prep 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or maybe even 10 freezer meals, because the time investment is going to be a little bit more. But if you're getting out all of your materials and you're in the kitchen, you might as well do more than one. In fact, I have found that even on, an afternoon on a Sunday, I can order some groceries and I can get my meals prepped for 2 weeks, which honestly is gonna save me so much time throughout the next 2 weeks, right? And by doing everything at the same time, you only have to clean up once, you only have to chop once. It's just a lot quicker and easier the more you do it. Okay, the next tip, and kind of in that same vein, is to batch prep your produce that you're chopping. So a lot of freezer meals call for maybe diced onion, minced garlic, diced carrot, diced celery, diced bell pepper. All of these things you can kind of batch chop at once, right? So if you know that you're doing multiple recipes that have onions in them, one thing I will do is just chop all of the onions at the beginning of my prep. I'll put them in a bowl and then I'll have them there so that I can use them throughout my freezer cooking. As I'm going, I can just use a measuring cup to kind of scoop it out and dump it in my bag. It just makes it a lot quicker and easier. That way you're kind of batch prepping everything at the same time. Another tip that can make your life a lot easier when you are freezer meal prepping is to use your food processor. If you are doing several recipes that call for grated cheese, I like to grate my own cheese when I can, and so by using your food processor, you are actually able to grate a large volume of shredded cheese pretty quickly, which I think is super convenient. And you can also use your food processor, if you haven't thought about this before, to shred carrots. And actually you can chop vegetables in the food processor as well. So if you're not one of those people like me that actually really likes chopping, you can throw a bunch of onions in the food processor and just kind of pulse it a little bit and you'll end up with chopped onions. But it's gonna make your life a lot easier and quicker, especially for shredding and chopping and grating. Another tip that I have, especially if you're going to do freezer cooking pretty often, is to keep a well-stocked pantry. What I mean by that is a variety of different canned goods, so canned veggies, canned beans, canned tomato products, also different sauces and things like that, like Worcestershire sauce, soy sauce, sesame oil, just different ingredients like that that you find yourself using. I know that I always try to keep a backup in my pantry of things that I use frequently, and even things that I use frequently for freezer cooking, like sesame oil or fish sauce or sriracha or things like that. I always try to keep a backup in my pantry. That way, if I want to do some freezer cooking, I'm not having to buy extra ingredients and I have a lot of things on hand. I also try to keep a variety of kind of accompaniments in my pantry to go along with my freezer meals. So different types of pasta. A lot of freezer recipes, especially ones that go in the slow cooker, will maybe call to serve the dish with pasta or serve it with rice. Rice is always something else that I keep on hand. I always also keep a box of instant mashed potatoes. I know that a lot of people have very strong opinions about instant mashed potatoes, but honestly, I have used them a lot in a pinch on a weeknight when I'm just trying to get dinner on the table, and say maybe I'm making, a pork roast with gravy or something like that. in the crock pot. I can just throw some instant mashed potatoes together. Maybe I have a couple cans of green beans and boom, I've got dinner on the table. Okay, the next tip that I have is to use either a garbage sack or bowl on your counter to discard trash while you're working. So when I'm doing a lot of prep work in my kitchen and a lot of cooking, I like to keep a bowl on my counter. And actually the first place I ever heard of someone doing this was when I used to watch Rachel Ray way back in the day on the Food Network when she had her show 30-Minute Meals. And she actually sold this product called a garbage bowl, which is actually what I have. I've had it for years. And basically you just keep it on the counter. And so like as you're chopping different vegetables, you can throw the seeds in there. You know, maybe you're chopping onions, you can throw the peels in there. Say you know, dump something out of a can and you're gonna rinse the can and recycle it later. You can just throw the can in there. That way you don't have to throw it in the trash. It kind of just keeps everything all contained. And then what you can do with all of your trash all at once is obviously take it to the trash can and dump it all out at the same time. It just makes cooking so much easier. You don't have to keep going back and forth to the trash can, especially if you're prepping like in one area of your kitchen and your trash can's in another area of your kitchen. It just makes things super quick and easy. I find it very helpful. Okay, so the next tip that I have is to handle all of your raw meat at the same time. Typically, I do this before I start putting any of the other ingredients into the bags with my freezer meals. So what I'll do is I'll have all of my bags in my baggie holders and I'll kind of set those up. So say I'm gonna make, you know, 3 different dishes with chicken or something like that. I'll take the chicken out of the container that it's in, put it directly into the bag and then toss the container, and then I'm able to wash my hands, and then I don't have to handle that chicken again, right? Because it's already in the bag. I'm just gonna put my other ingredients on top of it. You can also kind of batch add all of your protein, your raw proteins at the end. I find that that makes me forget what I'm gonna add to each bag, so I would rather do it at the beginning. But to me, I find it really helpful. That way I'm not, again, going back and forth, washing my hands, you know, contaminating my utensils, contaminating my kitchen, especially when you're, you know, handling raw chicken, so on and so forth. Okay, the next tip that I have is for ground meat. So a lot of freezer meals will call for either like maybe ground beef or ground turkey or ground sausage that is cooked and drained prior to putting it in the bag with the freezer meal or in the casserole or whatever it is you're making. This is kind of a personal preference. I have tried and seen recipes before where people will just throw the ground beef raw, like let's say you're putting it in a chili or something like that. You know, you can totally put it in there raw and then the meat will cook, like for example in the sauce or in the chili in that example I gave you. I personally don't prefer that. I prefer the texture of being able to saute the ground meat ahead of time and then put it in the bag with the other ingredients, but it's totally up to you. What I try to do to kind of minimize the time on this is that I batch cook my ground meat. So let's say I'm gonna be putting together a bunch of breakfast freezer meals and I know I'm gonna need a bunch of breakfast sausage. I'll just put it all into a pot and I'll saute it up, and then I can put it into a bowl with some paper towels and let it drain. And kind of the benefit of this too is that it's already cool. Then you can let it kind of cool off before you put it into the bags, and you're not like putting steaming hot, you know, ground beef or sausage in with your freezer meals. But I just try to batch my meals like that. So for example, if I know I'm going to make one you know, ground beef freezer meal, I might pick out 2 or 3 others that I can make at the same time, so I can just brown up a bunch of ground beef all at once. Okay, another tip that I have, and this is optional, but I do tend to do it sometimes, especially with sauces and marinades for freezer cooking, is to whisk all of your wet ingredients first before you pour them into the bag with your protein. So an example I can think of this is recently I made a barbecue chicken freezer meal, and the sauce recipe called for like barbecue sauce and olive oil and lemon juice and some other things I can't remember. And so in order to make sure that the sauce was all incorporated correctly, I put everything into a measuring cup and whisked it up before I put it in with the chicken in my freezer bag. And so that just makes sure, especially if you have a sauce that has oil in it, you want to kind of make sure that everything is emulsified. So that's something that helps me. And kind of in that same vein, if a recipe calls for a lot of different spices and it's kind of going to be a coating on the meat, I will also mix all of my spices together in a little bowl before I put them into the bag, just to make sure that everything is kind of evenly distributed. That also brings me to my next tip, talking about spices. So one of the things when you're putting together a lot of freezer meals that can be kind of tedious is going back and forth to your spice cabinet. And you're like, okay, I need to find the chili powder, I need to find the garlic powder, I need to find the oregano, I need to find this. And sometimes it's just gonna get really frustrating. And so what I do is I just look through all of my recipes. Let's say I'm gonna batch prep, 5 meals. I'll print all the recipes out, look at them. I'll go to my spice cabinet. I'll pull all of my spices all at once, just set them out on the counter. It's much easier for me to look at my counter and kind of see all the spices that I have than search through my spice cabinet. I've tried to organize my spice cabinet so many times, and it stays for a little bit and then it eventually turns back into a hot mess. So I just find it to be super time saving to have them all out on the counter ready to go. Okay, and the last tip that I have for you is to take some help from the store. Now, obviously pre-prepped and cooked and pre-chopped ingredients are gonna be a little bit more expensive, but what you have to realize is that your time is worth money too. So sometimes I will weigh my options, right? So like today I was doing some freezer meal cooking and I looked on the Walmart app because I was gonna order some groceries, and I thought, okay, I could order some pre-chopped onions and it's gonna cost me this much. However, I know that I have onions in my pantry and that's gonna cost me free because I already have them. So in that example, I just chose to chop my own onions. But let's say I didn't have any onions on hand and I wanted to save time, I probably would have spent the extra $3 and bought the pre-chopped onions, right? There are just times in our lives, I feel like, especially when you're trying to run a home and take care of a family and whatever you're trying to do, that you do have to kind of trade money for time sometimes. And buying pre-cooked ingredients and pre-chopped ingredients is a great way to do that. So some other examples I can think of that I do often are like pre-cooked breakfast sausage. That's something that's really convenient. I often buy pre-cooked bacon because you can just throw it in the microwave and crumble it up super quick, especially if there's a meal that calls for crumbled bacon to, top the dish with. Another thing is that a lot of grocery stores do sell like a pre-chopped carrot, onion, and celery mix in the produce section. That can be a really big time saver, so anything like that, even pre-washed produce bagged broccoli and things like that, compare the prices, and sometimes the prices aren't even that much more expensive. So that's definitely another time-saving tip as well. Okay, so those are all of the freezer meal tips that I have for you today. If there's any that you use that I missed, go ahead and leave those down in the comments below. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. If you guys are interested in learning more about the FreezerFit membership and all of the awesome recipes we have inside the membership and what it all entails, we have a free freezer meal class that you can take in the description box below. All you have to do is click that link and you can watch the class. We'll also send you a free cookbook with 10 recipes and you can kind of get a feel for it and see if it's something that you are interested in. It's really, really awesome membership. I know that it saves me a ton of time every week when I'm doing my freezer prepping. So thanks for watching and we will see you in the next video. Bye.